just like with a book design, with InDesign, you're going to want to use the master page templates. So if you, over here on the right side, I've got a template for title slides. I've got one for chapters. And then if I want to get deeper into something, there's a section slide, content, and then I have an empty one for when I want to just use images, more or less. And what that allows me to do is, let's say I just want to go ahead and have a title slide, I can just put in apply master to page and make sure it's A, and it gets applied. That one was already applied. And then this text is already in there. If I want to edit it, I can hold down Shift and Command and click, and that unlocks it so I can go back and change it. So maybe I'm just doing a lecture on sequence and pacing. So I can just edit that part. Another thing that I think is really important is making some kind of grid structure. So that's something I did as well. And the grid was established in the masters, so I can't really edit those unless I unlock them manually. But I've been pretty lenient with myself, so there's just basically a bunch of squares that I can use, and I can put images in all different ways. So for example, if I go to a content slide, I'm limited my text to the first 3 columns, and then the other 5 columns are for images. So by having a grid structure, just like with a book or a website, it just makes it a lot easier to flow in information. A lot of times when you see crappy presentations, it's because even if they're using the same font and the same colors throughout, they're putting stuff in different places and trying to squeeze things where they don't want to be, and that's why it looks like crap. So going back up here, this is something that I kind of did through found out about through trial and error. You can put in hyperlinks into InDesign files, and if you export as an interactive PDF, those will become live links. So, for example, here, and I'll also mention that I use character styles and paragraph styles extensively, and I don't think they get used enough. It's like CSS for print design, more or less. So I've already got one style, a paragraph style here. I'm trying to find which one I want to use. All right, let's go with this one. So I could put unlv.edu, and I want to make that into a link that goes to the web. So I'm going to double click on that, and you can either right click and scroll down to hyperlinks and do new hyperlink. If you have the whole URL, then you can just click from URL and it'll just automatically change it over to an active link. If you have it misspelled or it says it's misspelled for whatever reason, it won't let you do the right click option, so you have to go up to the menu. So go to type, go to hyperlinks and cross references and new hyperlink, and I can do link to URL. Let's just put www in front of there, and I can also apply a character style. Like I have one specifically for hyperlinks, so I click that, click OK, and it changes it there. I'm not going to be able to see what it does until I actually export it, so you'll see it working in a minute. Another way to use hyperlinks, which I think is pretty cool, is especially if you're making something that's going to be sent out and looked through, like say your portfolio, you could create a table of contents and actually activate different text in the table of contents to link to pages in your presentation. So, for example, these are all the sections in my document, and I'm going to create links to each section from this table of contents. So pacing is on page C1. So I'm going to select that text, go to hyperlinks, new hyperlink, and from the drop down, instead of doing URL, I'm going to go to page. And from here, you could link it to a different document entirely. This is just going to go to the same document. And then you can select which page it's going to go to. So I'm going to click C1. I don't want the style to change to the hyperlink style. So I'm going to do same style. It'll keep the text in the same character style I have. So that one is linked, and I'll just go ahead and do these other two. Page.
So does that work in the PDF as well?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and export this. When you export, you can do Command E or just go to the File menu, and you'll want to make sure that it says Interactive PDF. And I always save them as versions because I'll end up having like 10 versions because somebody doesn't like something and I have to redo it. So, all right, so interactive PDF, I can choose what pages get exported. If you know specifically that it's going to be viewed as a presentation like this, you can add page transitions, but I wouldn't get too fancy with it. The only one I usually use is fade because it's really subtle. It doesn't draw too much attention to itself. It just gives you a nice transition from one slide to the next. But it only shows up if you're viewing it in presentation mode. It doesn't show up if you're just clicking through it as a normal document. So all of that is fine. You can also choose the resolution, what it gets exported at. It's going to convert it to RGB because it's meant for the screen, but if you know that it's going to be printed, you might want to change it to 300 ppi. If the space isn't going to be too crazy, I usually do 144. That way, if it does need to be printed, it still looks okay, and I feel like it looks better on high-resolution screens. I wouldn't go to 72 ppi because then it does start to look really grainy unless you're just looking at it on something that has a really low resolution. So I'm going to have that resolution. The rest of this I don't really mess with. Let's see. All right, export. Okay. So I've got my presentation. I'm going to do Command L to go into it. And you can see the fade, like really subtle, nothing crazy. And when I scroll over the contents, you'll see that the cursor changes to a pointer finger. So I click and it takes me to that specific page. If I wanted to, and if I'd really thought about it, I could have it link back to the contents. so I wouldn't have to keep going back up, but it lets me go to whatever page I've linked it to, which is pretty cool. And then the URL, you can just click, and you can tell that it's live because when you roll over it, you'll have the little description. So you click, and I don't know why, but it should go straight to the website that you've chosen. So along those lines, you can also import things like videos, like the presentation I showed you guys before about my work. That one had some little videos from Instagram, and those are just brought in as videos. So there's an option that you can pull up. There's all these kind of buttons at the bottom that are more interactive based things. And so there's one that says media. You can import videos. You can test them to see what they look like. You can say whether or not it loops. The thing that sucks about it is with a PDF, it'll only play the video the very first time you open it. So if you open it, show the presentation, and then go do something else, go and try to show the presentation again, the videos won't play. I don't know why, but it doesn't do it that way.
Like if you switch back and forth pages or...
Well, like, for example, let's see. Okay. So this is the first time I've opened it and looked at this page. Right now it's playing. But once it goes through and plays, if I go back to it, there's no way to get it to start playing again. So that's the kind of shitty thing about it. If you use PowerPoint, that's one of the advantages. It's a little bit better at handling interactive things. You could look more into the ePublisher part of InDesign, and I believe with that you can have videos actually embedded and be able to play them over and over, but PDFs don't really have that functionality. Maybe in the future. Okay. So those are the main things with InDesign. Does anybody have any questions? Was that helpful at all? Okay. All right, PowerPoint. So PowerPoint, first off, don't use any of these templates. Do your own. Let's see. You'll want to do a blank presentation, and you'll kind of have to gauge what format to use. Widescreen is pretty prevalent now, but the standard presentation size I think is like 7.5 inches by 10 inches. I think one of the reasons is it can easily print out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and it will fit on pretty much any screen. But it's really up to you. Just like InDesign, there are masters in PowerPoint, and you definitely need to head there at the very beginning. So go to View and Master, and then Slide Master, and you get all of these sample pages, and they all look pretty bad. The very first one is the standard. It's going to set the the standard for the entire document in terms of what content pages look like and what the typefaces will look like. So I don't want to use the default font. But I will say when you choose fonts, you really have to be careful about what you use. Since with PowerPoint, everything is kept live unless you export it as a PDF. If somebody else who is on a PC, for example, and they don't have Gotham, it's not going to show up as Gotham. It's going to show up as whatever Microsoft thinks it should show up as. With licensing, you can't just give somebody the font as a file and tell them to install it. Theoretically, you have to have the person purchase their own license to be able to use it. So the safer route, especially if it's going to be distributed to a lot of other people, is to either use a font that the organization already owns. For example, with Cisco Corporation, they use Myriad Pro for everything. So everybody in the company is supposed to have Myriad Pro. People say they don't, but they're supposed to have it. So that's what I would use to use as the typeface in all of my presentations for Cisco. The safest route is when you go to choose fonts, go to Font Collections and Windows Office Compatible, and it'll give you a list of fonts that should be on pretty much any Windows machine. The options aren't great, and this is where things get dangerous when other people try to design it and they don't really know much about design. For this, let me do, see, like Helvetica isn't even on here. It's ridiculous. I'm going to do Arial, mostly because it's pretty standard and there's variations, so I can have regular, italic, bold, italic, etc. So I've got this box selected. I'm going to go to Home, the Home tab, Font Collections, Windows Office Compatible, and change that to Arial Bold. And while I'm at it, I can go ahead and change the color. Actually, I'll do that in a minute. I'll do this first. And then the text box, I'm going to do the same thing. Except I'm going to do regular, at least to start. And then with this text box, it's all automatically in bullet points and indented. I learned a trick so that you can basically have paragraph styles without, even though PowerPoint doesn't really have them. And the way to do it is with these bullet points. So with the very first one, I just want this to be like a header. So I'm going to go to this box at the top toolbar and deselect the bullet point box, and it takes it away. And then I'm going to change this to bold. And so anytime I start a text box, it's going to automatically go to that, that size, that weight, and all. For the second line, I'm going to go up here to the ruler, and these are actually your tabs. So I'm going to deselect the bullet points once again, and I'm going to move those two arrows over as far to the left as I can. So it's going to be aligned with the header. So this might be my subhead. The third line, I'm going to do the same thing. Deselect the bullet points. I have to select the bar beneath the two arrows to move all three things. So I move those, and I'm going to change the size. Let's make it 16. And so that's the third level. Let's say the fourth and fifth level I want to keep as normal bullets. So for that, I'm not going to deselect the bullet point option, but I am going to click the bar in the ruler and move it to the left, and I'm going to change the size so that it matches the body copy. In the fifth level, same thing, except I'm going to move it and be like another set of bullet points underneath. And you can even keep going further. So what this is, each one of these represents a tab level or an indent level. So let's say these boxes up at the top that say indent more or less. I'm going to go to where there's no indents and start typing. So that's the header. I'm going to press return and indent once. That's the subhead. Press return again and indent. Body, copy. Return, indent again. I get my bullet points, blah, blah, blah. Do it again, and I get another set of bullet points. So if I want to go back to the body copy size, I go to indent less until I get to that level. So what I'll do, especially if this is going out to a lot of people, I'll say like this level, subhead, 1 indent, body, 2 indents, and so on and so forth. And you can even keep adding more. I think I've done as many as 7. So like if I go to the 5th one here, press return and tab, it'll move it over to where I really don't want it there. I'm going to move it and make this into a numbered list. And so that's there, and that'll be the 6th level, and so on and so forth. So if you want to do something more standardized like paragraph styles, that's the best way to do it in PowerPoint, at least from what I've found. And I'm going to change this because it's not right. Okay. Then let's say that I want this to have my company's logo on it at all times. There's a couple ways to bring in images. You can go to the picture button and find your image. And it brings it in. And with scaling, you'll want to go to one of the corners and hold down, actually, you just go to one of the corners, you don't have to hold down shift, and it'll scale it proportionally. Do not go to one of the sides because that stretches it. You know not to do that anyway. Bless you. Another way to bring in images, especially if it's a vector, or even if it's another type of image, you can bring in vector shapes. The trick is it'll import it as a PDF instead of a normal image. So let's say I want to take this from Illustrator and bring it in. If I just copy and paste it like normal, it's not going to put it in properly. So I'm going to copy it And hopefully this works. It'll probably not work because I'm doing it in front of you guys. All right. I'm going to go to Edit and Paste Special and go to PDF. Yes. And it puts it in as a PDF. And so you can scale it just like you would any other image. So let's say I take that and put it in the corner. And then everything else, I'm just going to mess with the boxes so that things are where I want them to be, because it'll set the standard for the entire document. So even things like footers, you'll want to go ahead and change the font for those. Make sure the size is what you want it to be. With colors, you'll get the standard colors here. If you go to more colors, you can choose custom ones. But let's see, you can also make your own color palettes. So if you go to Slide Master, the Slide Master tab, go to the Colors button, scroll down to Customize Colors, and here you can click on the colors and choose specific ones. Some of these I've saved because I use them all the time. So all of those colors will automatically be added to my palette. And you can name it, so DK sample, save, and now when I go to colors, I'll have that palette saved. So if I have that selected, then when I go and try to change the color of my type or my shape or whatever, it'll automatically give the colors that I want for this specific document. And I'd be using the actual colors of my identity. I just can't remember the numbers for them right now. So you can change the colors that way. And now when I go to all these other pages, that color, the typeface and fonts, all of that is the same as this very first page. So you want to make sure that that is set from the get-go. What to keep in mind is anything that you put image-wise in this first one is also going to show up in all of these other master slides. So these are kind of like children of the parent slide, the daddy slide. This title slide, this one's a bit more flexible, so this one you can customize a bit more. But just like the very first one, you'll want to go and make adjustments and make sure everything is the way you want it. And you can also make custom ones. So let's say I don't really like most of these. I can hold down Shift. Maybe I can't. Nope, I can't. I can just select them and delete ones that I don't want. And I can right-click and make a new layout. And from here, I could insert placeholders. So let's see. We go to Slide Master tab, insert placeholder button, and go to Content. That'll give me a box where I could put in text or any other type of thing. So these little buttons here that mean that somebody could click, and if they don't want text, they could add a chart or a graph or a picture or whatnot. So that gives them more flexibility. If you don't want to give them flexibility with a placeholder, then you choose a more specific one, like text. And so that gives them the text box. You can do one for images. I call it pictures. So you can add those there. So let's say that this is how I want it. I can go to Close Master, and when I go to add a new slide, I click that button, it'll give me all the layout options that are available. So it's only those little kid slides that show up. The one that I just made is the last one here, so I can click, and if I want to put in a table, I could put in a table. An image, I could put in an image, so on and so forth. And just like that other daddy slide, if I start typing with and putting in text, when I do indent, it'll give me those different paragraph styles. So especially if you're showing this to other people as a template, you just have to kind of explain that that's how that works, because otherwise nobody would know. If you want to add a background, you'll want to do that in the master slide as well. So I'm going to go back to the master slide. I'm going to insert a new layout. And this one, I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to take the logo out here. I'll put it there. Take out this other stuff. But there's a button up here that says Background Styles. I'm going to click on that and go to Format Background. And from here, you could choose a color. Like maybe I want gray. You could do a gradient, which maybe, I don't know. Or you could do a picture. So if you've got some kind of designed background, this is what you'd want to do. So I'm going to go and choose an image from a file. And I'm going to choose this blue one that I've made. And so that gets put in there. And I'm going to change the text so that you can actually read it. So anytime you have a shape or a text box selected, there's always going to be a format option. It's going to be highlighted usually on the end. So if you click there, you get all these options like alignment, outlines, shape outlines, fill colors, scale. If you click Format pane, that's where you get this box that's on the right. So right now it doesn't have any fill. I'm going to add a fill and just make it white. And if I have it extended all the way across, of course, there's not really a margin, so the text is really close to the edge. To fix that, I'm going to go to the text options box. And here you get 3 different tabs. With the last one, you can choose margins for this particular text box. So I'm going to add an inch margin, so that brings it in. I could also manipulate it so that the other sides have a certain amount of margin to them, but that's how that works. One other thing that's kind of tricky is this shrink text on overflow, resize shape to fit text. That can get kind of confusing, and honestly I kind of forget what each one means. Theoretically, when it says shrink text on overflow, that means when somebody types and it's way more than the text box can hold, it'll automatically shrink the type, which is normally a huge no-no, because anytime you have a presentation and you're showing it, if it's too small, you can't read it. Depending on the font, if it's any smaller than 14 or 16, it's probably going to be too small to read. So you don't usually want to do that. Sometimes when it's a template, people just have a lot of stuff they want to put on there and they won't listen to you. And you say, just make a new slide. So you just have to give in and do the shrink option. Otherwise, you'll either want to do, well, you'll usually want to do resize shape to fit text, and then you can mess with the margins. So if I were to add more lines here, it would keep with the margins I have and just make the shape bigger. So now if I close master and go to insert new slide and choose this title, I can add in text, blah, 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 and it makes the box bigger. So that's that. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, these are the tricks that I kind of figured out on my own. Nobody ever told me this stuff. So if you ever have to use PowerPoint, these are some ways of kind of manipulating the system so that it actually looks good. I've had to make email templates, poster templates, invitation templates, all kinds of stuff in PowerPoint because that's the only way to send things out and allow people to change the text or the pictures. So, like I said, you don't have to do this for Wednesday. If you're more comfortable in Keynote, you're more than welcome to use that, or export as a PDF from InDesign. But I do think this is kind of a good thing to know, just being realistic. So are there any questions about this or the presentations at all? Okay. Yeah.
In making a grid system in PowerPoint, is that easy or hard to do? Or?
It's not terribly hard. It's not as easy as InDesign. So what you would do is you would go to the slide master, and depending on if you wanted the grid system on all of the slides or just one of these child slides, you would go to whatever slide you want it to be on. If you do the daddy slide, it's going to give you the guides on every single slide you make. What you have to do is right-click, go to guides. You have to add a vertical guide, and no matter what you're doing, where your cursor is, it's going to put it at the 0 mark, right in the middle. I'm going to do the same thing and put in a horizontal guide. Same deal, right in the middle. What you can do from here is you can click on a guide and move it. And this is kind of weird because it goes 0 is the middle and then it moves outward. So when it says 6.25, you can kind of judge, okay, it needs to be 6.25 on the other side too, in terms of where it is on the ruler. So what you have to do from here, so you don't have to do the click add guide every time, you can duplicate the guides. If you hold down Option and click, then you can drag the guide over and put it where you need it to go. So same thing with the top and bottom. So I have a 3.25 and I'll make it a little higher from the bottom. And so you could do it that way. Then to make the grid, you could do a little math and make it all even if you want. But same type of deal. Option click to keep adding guides, and make yourself a grid system. Oops. Okay, now it's not working. You get the idea though. So that's how you'd have to do it. It's just not, in InDesign and Photoshop and Illustrator, you could just go to the ruler and click and drag as many guides as you want. You can't do it that way with PowerPoint. But this is possible, and like I said, it'll get added to every slide in the presentation as long as you are using the master. Any other questions? Okay. Why don't we take like a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back, and really the rest of the time is just going to be working on figuring out what you're going to do for your own presentations.